many children you have or how old they are. But what do you plan on telling your children when it's time for them to go to Iraq and fight?
Well, I hope that by that time we'll solve this powerful problem. I've voted against permanent military bases. I've said elsewhere I think this giant monstrosity, the embassy we're building, is a terrible waste of money. I don't buy this notion. I've been repulsed by President Bush basically condemning a generation to war. I mean, he has said this is a generational conflict. I don't want my kids, I don't want the Iraqi kids, I don't want the Afghanistani kids, I don't want anybody's kids condemned to a generation-long war.
The Iraqi parliament was working so diligently for this that in the summer they took a vacation because it got hot. And they're not humping 80 pounds on their back in 120-degree heat. So you have to really wonder how serious is the parliament in Iraq toward trying to resolve their differences within their country. We have supposedly a coalition of the willing that went to war. Most of these were countries that were kind of bullied into bringing some troops in, with the exception perhaps of the British, and most of them have left. What we need now is a coalition of concerned nations to go in, whether it be UN peacekeeping forces, whether it be other countries in the region that put forces in there to keep the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Kurds from simply slaughtering each other and let them sort it out. We need to bring our voice home.
I'm Cindy Corey. Thank you for coming. I think you needed to do that, and I appreciate it. I'm going to go in kind of a bit of a different direction. You talked about the Israeli-Palestinian situation. You mentioned it several times as being key, and I appreciate that you did that because some people don't want to talk about that at all in the Congress as being an issue that we need to work on. You talked about the need for oversight to prevent war profiteering in Iraq and culpability. And you know, and you have supported us, and our family greatly appreciates everything that you do, and I know people here don't realize that that continues, that this week my daughter was talking to you because there are many dimensions to the accountability that we seek both for Rachel and for Palestinians. And this week, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed a case that was brought by our family and by the families of 10 Palestinians who were killed in home demolitions in Gaza and in the West Bank. And they dismissed it on the basis of political question, which is that to make a decision and to hear our case would override the responsibilities of the executive and the legislative branches of our government. And that's where the responsibility for foreign policy and for accountability in these areas lies. I feel like the Ninth Circuit pointed a finger at the executive and legislative branches and says this is where the responsibility lies. The position of the U.S. government is that Rachel's case has not been properly investigated, not been adequately investigated, and yet there's been no accountability on the part of our government. Nothing has happened. Yesterday we got word, as Craig and I were driving back here from the Midwest, that a Palestinian teenager was killed in the Gaza Strip by a bulldozer when the bulldozer lunged at youth during and whatever was happening at the time. And we don't know. We're trying to get all the information that we can get. We were up in the middle of the night trying to reach human rights organizations there because we want the facts about what happened there. But the thing is that a lot of our work has been to seek accountability so that no more kids die under Caterpillar bulldozers, under the weapons that we manufactured by corporations in this country. It is the responsibility of the United States Congress to take action when human rights violations are committed with our equipment paid for by our country. And that is not happening. And so I would like to know what you can do in order to make sure that this case that's happening is properly investigated, that we get the facts about what happened to the Palestinian teenager that died under a bulldozer, whose body was mangled under a bulldozer yesterday, and that we hold Israel accountable for the human rights violations that, that we also have responsibility for. I'd just like to know what you will do about that. I think this is something that you can really help with. I'd also like to say one other thing. Our friends in the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and in Jewish Voice for Peace had put out calls to action in the last day or two because of there's a new designation that Israel now has for Gaza as an enemy entity, which is not even, as I understand it, legal under international law. And yet, what it happens, and what Israel's planning to do, is to do, I'm losing my words, but punishment of all of the population of Gaza by withholding electricity, sometimes water and fuel, because of Qasem rocket attacks coming from this area where they are totally isolated, imprisoned because of the policies of our government for the last year and a half or two, and for longer. And so I would just like to urge you to think about what action you might be able to take in order to make sure that, unlike Condoleezza Rice has basically, I think, endorsed this, and I would like to see that we take some action to oppose it.
Thank you.
Jeff, I'm Jeff Blackwell from Olympia, and I voted for you, and I intend to support you regardless of what decision you make, if you make it in good conscience. I spent 13 months in Baghdad with USAID, and I think that if you do vote to support an extension of this, there should be conditions that are more democratic rather than what the Republicans have been basing the war upon. Something I'd recommend, if you haven't read it, is Things Fall Apart by the Brookings Institution. And the other thing is that Muqtada al-Sadr, who is really the hero of the core Shia, he has to be part of the solution for peace. And I know that he has declared a truce recently, but he has been treacherous in the past, as have his adversaries. But I think that a dialogue needs to go on with Muqtada al-Sadr, and I don't think the Republicans have encouraged that. And I would like to see you